good morning to you all. On behalf of the National Film and Video Foundation, welcome all delegates to the launch of the 2020-2021 Economic Impact Assessment Closed Webinar. It's indeed a pleasure to have you join us this morning as we launch this very important research, amongst other things, to determine the total contribution of the South African film industry to our GDP. My name is Lala Duku. I'm a film industry practitioner and as well serve on the NFVF Council. And today I have the pleasure of being your pilot for the next 2 hours and a bit. So buckle up. I hope you do enjoy from the comfort of your home and office. Let me first take the opportunity to acknowledge the presence of the chairperson of the NFVF Council, Ms. Tulwana Cheke, the Deputy Chair, Dr. Jerry Mufokeng, esteemed members of our council, the NFVF CEO, Ms. Makhosazana Khanyile, our panel members for the day, NFVF stakeholders, media, and industry at large. All protocol has been observed. As I mentioned, I'll be your pilot, and so to do that, before we proceed, I'd like to address some very basic rules of engagement to ensure a smooth running of our virtual proceedings for the benefit of our enjoyment. Please note that all the attendees' audio links will be muted during the proceedings to allow the panelists to be heard clearly without any interference. The presentation that will be presented this morning will be available on the NFVF website under Research Reports. Should you want to follow the presentation, you can access it by clicking on the link presentation.pdf in the Zoom or Teams chat box and then download it. Otherwise, copy the link into your browser to download. All delegates are welcomed to send their written questions via the chat box found at the bottom of your Zoom window. Please, when you state your questions, also state your name, surname, affiliation or company before typing the question so we can address the question. Certain questions will be selected by the NFVF team for relevant panel members, and then I will then select and send the question to the panelists, then they will answer that. The remainder of the questions, should we run out of time, will then be posted on the NFVF website along with the answers. We will also upload the entire EIA webinar session to the NFVF website for further review and for the delegates that were unable to attend. Remember, you can see the link provided in the chat box to download the presentation.pdf. We will now proceed with the Economic Impact Assessment webinar. First up, we're going to call our NFVF CEO, Ms. Makhosazana Khanyile, who will give us an overview and tell us why it is that we are here today. Before she comes up, I'd like to give you a short profile on her. She was appointed CEO of the National Film and Video Foundation in April 2019. During her tenure, Makhosazana had strengthened the NFVF strategic partnership and broadened the institution's impact and reach. The CEO has secured notable partnership with industry-leading institutions such as Netflix, TikTok, MidSita, MultiChoice, and the SABC. Previously, she was Director of Marketing, Communication and Ad Sales and On-Air Services at Fox Network Group Africa, now called Disney, where she expertly led and positioned of 8 Fox Network Group channels and was pivotal in growing the footprint and reach of the National Geographic Channel. Her career in broadcasting spans over 2 decades, and we can't wait to hear from her why we are here today. Over to you, Ms. Khanyile.
Good morning, and thank you so much to the Program Director, Lala, and good morning to all of our stakeholders that are joining us this morning. And so American author, anthropologist, and filmmaker Zora Neale Hurston once said that research is a formalized curiosity. It is poking and prying with a purpose. And research for us as an organization is a useful tool that enables us to make strategic decisions. Our ability to gain insights and to understand these insights within a strategic context is essential in understanding our industry's landscape. But more importantly, it's about how we respond to this information. The Economic Impact Assessment Study, which we commissioned through BDO, seeks to do just that. It seeks to enable us to formalize our collective industry curiosity pertaining to the key aspects that earmark and quantify the economic impact of the South African film industry. The last research we did was in 2017, and we were due an update. And I know that the industry has been eagerly awaiting this session. As you will see, this study focuses on filming activities within South Africa, either wholly or partially produced locally and abroad through co-productions, and most importantly, includes the impact that the pandemic has had on the industry and the country's economic outlook as a whole. The strength of the research lies not only in outlining the challenges that we live in as an industry or even as practitioners, but more so on its key recommendations that will assist us in identifying the next best course of action to recalibrate, rebuild, and restore it to what it once was and even more. Even more important, I think, our responses moving forward, both at an organizational and shareholder level, in terms of what we do with this information is important. We have invited you this morning to not only listen and gain valuable insights, but to also strategize as you listen, right? To come back to us as our valued stakeholders with your own key takeaways and potential ideas inspired by some of these outcomes in terms of the next steps. And we look forward to that further engagement. And we want to utilize research moving forward as an organization to reposition ourselves to better respond to the needs and challenges of the industry and to better play I think a much broader part in terms of being able to reshape what currently looks like very much an uncertain future. And so thank you very much to our NFVF Council member, Ms. Duku, for facilitating this session today, to the panelists, our esteemed panelists who have taken time out of their busy diaries to engage with us this morning on how we can meaningfully engage and effectively utilize these insights that will be coming out of this research study. And to all of our guests and stakeholders who have joined us this morning, thank you very much for joining us, and I will hand back over to you, Ms. Duku. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kanyile. I mean, it goes without saying that the film and television industry has, like in fact all industries, suffered greatly due to the pandemic at a time when the industry held everyone together in the various lockdowns. You know, the creators, producers, talent, production, distributors, and value chains were all falling apart. I mean, the delicate balance between livelihoods and lives has been extremely difficult to maintain in these unprecedented times that we found ourselves in. Thank you so much for the invitation, and you know, as you said, that this is going to be an engagement. So we look forward to the questions that are going to come from these engagements. Please remember to put them onto your chat box, say your name, your affiliation, and where it is that you are coming from. So without any further ado, we'd like to dive straight into this important research that we are here for today. I'd therefore like to introduce Ms. Christelle Gorman, who is the Director of Strategic Development and Advisory at DBO, who will take us through this study. Christelle is a director, as mentioned, in advisory services and has advised extensively in industries like tourism, hospitality and leisure, property and infrastructure sectors in her 30-year career. She has been instrumental in establishing the infrastructure advisory services offering in South Africa and was the lead director of infrastructure advisory in sub-Saharan Africa over 10 years. Christelle, over to you.
Good morning, everybody, and it's so great to be here to bring the study to you. It has been a study that has happened over many, many months, all of it during the COVID lockdown. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you as the stakeholders for responding to the research, for interacting with us, for providing us your input. In the end, this is your voice. It is not our study. It is your study. And I'm really, really looking forward to bringing this across to you. If I can just say that, you know, it is very hard. You are a creative industries, you are a creative people in this industry. So I'm going to try and make and be as passionate about the numbers as I can be, so that this is something that really, really stays with us, and we look at how we can improve the sector and take this forward. I have my colleague Dabulani Debedu with me. Most of you would have interacted with Dabulani, and he'll also be just providing some of the technical answers when we go into the question and answer session. So if we can go to the first slide, thank you very much. So the outline really, as the CEO has already indicated, covered a wide range of topics. We looked at trends, both here in South Africa as well as globally. We obviously looked at COVID, and then we did the actual numbers. We developed the economic impact, and then provide recommendations coming out of that. If we can go through to the next slide. Thank you. So the objectives really was fourfold. It was to understand industry trends globally, and how that affects and how that works in South Africa, and if it does in fact work. We know there's often things that are slightly different in our own country. It really was to look at the challenges, asking you about what challenges are you facing in doing your everyday jobs and running your companies. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs in this industry, so really looking at that challenging landscape, understanding the impact of the industry, and then lastly what the pandemic impact was on the industry. So we basically had to look at it before, the years before, and then now with the year with the pandemic. So if we look at trends, global trends, so some of these we see in South Africa as well, and some of them are very much more global. There has been for some time a declining film attendance. I think you all know this. This has been accelerated through COVID, in people going to physical venues. There's been a slow return back to venues in South Africa as well as globally. We've unfortunately lost some of our film industry or movie houses and companies. So these have been tough times that we've have gone through. There's definitely been over time a shrinking of the theatrical windows, and this is a significant shrinkage. We think from 90 days plus and now shortened to only 17 days that a film is actually on as a feature. It means that we are all have short memories. You have to get to your audience very, very quickly to be able to make that money, to be able to move it through the window. There's a change in consumer preference for content consumption. Obviously, globally, this is far bigger than it is in South Africa. For us, we don't have all the content channels available yet. Also, we have a slightly different population makeup, and obviously streaming is still very difficult for some of our population due to high costs of Wi-Fi and perhaps very slow connections. So perhaps that will be increasing, similar to global trends in the future, but not quite as large as we've seen overseas. And then finance has become riskier. Having those health and safety costs have increased significantly, and then insurance cost tenfold. Even for us as a company, we see significant increase in insurance costs. So I'm sure in industries where you have to bring a lot of people together to be able to make productions, that is even more higher and more important to bring together. If we can go to the next slide, please. So what have we seen in South Africa? So a study was done by DSAC, and it was covering basically the entire cultural and creative industries. So it's not just film and video. Some of these would apply obviously to the film sector as well. But we saw that 95% of respondents had experienced a cancellation or indefinite postponement of work scheduled. So significant impact. Not everybody stopped, but certainly significant impact, and they didn't maybe stop forever, but it did actually bring it down. And this has a knock-on effect, because if it wasn't done this year and you only take it into production the next year, then future productions also has to wait, because the money pot is only so big, and you also need to get the people back into the industries. It's also a big concern, because it does mean that you lose trained people as they go off to other sectors, because they have to earn a living. 45% of the respondents could not continue with their normal business activities during the lockdown. So that is a very hard place. 18% reported that they couldn't pay the employees. Only 18% could actually pay the employees. So a very big percentage that could not pay employees as per usual. 79% knew that there's government support, but only a quarter could actually access these because of how their companies are set up. So unfortunately, the benefit didn't always filter through. And when you have 95% of the responses not actually actively busy with their projects, not having access to the benefits obviously had a significant effect. This means that the whole DSAC industry lost or reduced by nearly 100 billion in South Africa. Significant numbers. We know other industries have been hit hard, but this is a significant number for this industry. Next slide, please. So if we look at some of the COVID-19 impact around the world, we see that the economic impact of the global industry in 2019 before COVID was estimated at 414 billion. It retracted by a significant percentage. There were 14.2 million jobs, and 3 million of those were lost over that period. It's actually interesting. Remember that number, because I'm going to come back to it when we look at the South African numbers. That is a 21% decline in jobs globally in the film industry. And we'll have to look and see now, how does that affect and look in South Africa? So in most of the commissions have indicated that they expected production volume to decrease and that it would have a damaging effect, but many of the industries have started coming back. We have obviously seen in other countries like live festivals and so come back, so therefore actually working of the film industry and having shoots, etc., has improved far faster than we have achieved here in South Africa. Can we go to the next slide, please? Globally, there was a lot of measures put in place. We've had some of these measures, but not all of them. I'd say one of the biggest measures have been in trying to fast track production once it was possible to actually reopen again and to start production, and to have that development money in place, and to make sure that there was a formal commissioning of new productions. I think it would be in South Africa didn't quite see the same application, and so therefore the fact that there was also tax credits and other financing and grants helped, but it was certainly just getting back to work and making that happen that had the biggest impact in respect of the relief measures put into place. Can we go to the next slide, please? So if we looked at our consultation here in South Africa and the feedback, we see a very interesting change that has happened. The previous study sort of indicated that the majority of the stakeholders were actually in Gauteng. There's been quite a growth in the Western Cape, a small growth, but a significant growth in the KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape, and this is from support from local commissions. So it is great to see it starting, the film industry widening in the country, and we hope to see that the next study in 5 years' time will obviously show a further widening of the geographical concentration. So a nice balanced response that is not just coming from one location, which is great. Next slide, please. Again, we had a nice balanced response from across the production genres, a significant increase in the number of short film producers that have taken part in this study. We can't see if that is an actual indication that that there's been more focus on these industries, or that just the responsiveness and the size of these players have achieved that they can now provide the input also into the industry study. So nice balanced approach. So we feel that the information that was received can really be applied across the industry. We go to the next slide, please. Again, we received a balanced approach in respect of pre-production, production, and post-production, with perhaps a lower number on the distribution and exhibition side. But again, we feel that the information is quite pertinent to everybody in the industry, given this nice balanced approach of feedback. We also try to make sure, of course, that that is the case, so that we don't have one part standing out and their challenges maybe being more pronounced than other areas. Can I go to the next slide, please? So if we look at the challenges faced by the operators, and I don't know if you can maybe just press another button. I don't know if we we'll bring up some of the detail to the side. Sorry, whomever is doing the slides, could you maybe just enter one more time? Okay, it comes to the next slide. Okay, let's go back to the slide. I'll try and talk it through while you're actually seeing this. So the interesting thing that you see here, that the challenges is not just financial. Much of the time when we start the conversations with the industry stakeholders, they were actually, you know, everybody thought it's funding. We need more funding. And actually it's not just the funding, and it's probably also why you saw the way in which some of the measures internationally was put into place that didn't just deal with the funding aspect, but actually dealt with other challenges. So regulatory and red tape, this really very much came back to some of the issues, frustrations with the DTIC process, particularly in respect of perhaps when they started going in to application, some of the requirements changed as the application goes in over time. So it takes a lot longer for the applications to go through, and that has been a frustration indicated more than once. So red tape and regulatory issues is still a big issue, but also infrastructure, not having necessarily the right infrastructure in place. Distribution and marketing remains access to that, and then the competition and market access, the two sort of link quite strongly with each other, also remain quite an impact. And then slow transformation in the industry, which means that sometimes the funding cannot be accessed because it doesn't come with the right transformation targets in place, or during the process of it. So that definitely is the case. Can I go to the next slide, maybe just see if I want to pick up on one or two of the details here? I think most of that has been mentioned. I don't know if I can ask my colleague, Jabulani, if there's any one area in the research that really stood out in respect of the challenges that you would like to highlight.
I think, Christel, perhaps one thing that can be highlighted, which is linked to the regulatory and also the red tape, is the issue of the lack of coordination and also integration amongst the various industry support agencies at a national, provincial, and also at the local level, including other agencies that are quite important from an industry association perspective that support the industry in the private sector, and also just the feedback that we had in terms of the inadequate support that the emerging filmmakers have in general. Of course, some provinces are doing better than others. The one that was mentioned by stakeholders that is quite aggressive and has done well in this regard is the KZN province through the KZN Film Commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. So I think that was one of the interesting factors that we did see. If we could just get the slide back on again, and as Jay mentioned, the emerging filmmakers and the frustration that particularly they have had in this industry of late, and it has meant that they haven't sort of developed and moved on in the life cycle, and they're still very much entry entrepreneurs. And a lot of this has been treated very much as a once-off instead of a continuous development, so that larger enterprises can actually come out of it. So that was one of the matters, that challenges that keeps on coming up, because this is also then creates a funding challenge, because obviously for most of the funding agents that are working with government money and are government agencies, this is a very important aspect to deal with. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So if we look at the funding, then it is very interesting to see, and perhaps it's quite small there, but you'll see this sort of 32% that is public funding. Everybody expects that actually there's a lot of public funding that goes in, and it's predominantly public funding, but in fact it's still private and self-funding and through commissioning that actually drives most of the funding. And in most cases, the 32% of public funding cannot be unlocked unless the other funding is in place to some extent. So it is exceptionally important that this the way that it works and that coordination that Jabulani talked about is actually in place, so that you can have the activations happening at the right time for the funding to really make a difference. How does the nature of the funding look? So grant funding remains obviously a large component, as well as commissioning, followed by the other pre-sales and equity and other types of funding. What we also have seen is the emergence of crowdfunding and family funding for some of these projects, particularly for the smaller projects, and often to access the grants. And this has been an interesting, also new funding mechanism that's brought into place. Next slide, please. So the impact of COVID, that C word, if we look at this, for all industries, this is always for me very heart-rending to see how much the industries have been affected. And the film industry has certainly been significantly affected. If we look here, it's great to see that many have still been able to remain operating, although the majority have not operated in full. We've only had 17% that could actually fully operate. That means that 80% of more of normal. But only 21 or 22% or so have actually closed, either temporarily or permanently. So it does show that the industry is has tried hard to stay above water and to continue operating. It is also known that a lot of these industries are self-employed, you're self-owned, and therefore if you haven't had staff to lay off, then you basically just had to keep yourself going over that time and try and keep enough working capital in place so that when things turn, you can actually restart. And I think that is the good question, is that restart. How are we going to be funding that? Because it is a different kind of funding that you need. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. So if we look at the operational revenue, so as you can see there, although many have tried to stay working, even if it is at a lower pace, and have tried to keep some activity going, from a revenue basis, it is just absolutely decimated. So with 62% of the respondents showing that they have a significantly lower than normal revenue. On the other side, we've had 20% that have had higher than normal and significantly higher than normal. We understand this is very linked to the digital medium and animation, etc. So there has been components of the industry that have done well in this era of COVID, but for the majority of the industry, it has been a very, very tough time from a revenue basis for a very long time. We kept on thinking we're going to come back, and then we obviously go back into another higher lockdown, and then we have to basically stop and then restart again. So the stopping and restarting has certainly played havoc with revenues, and therefore the decrease in employment. And we can see there, where we look at decrease and significant decrease, we're looking at over 65% that have decreased their employees. Many people have tried to hang on as long as possible, but it is a definite indication that some employees have been lost to the industry forever, which is very sad, because it is an industry that needs skills. Can I go to the next slide, please? So if we look at the source of support, then the majority of funding was sourced through the NFVF, followed obviously by the DTIC and the provincial film commissions, and also then the SABC. So they make up quite a significant proportion of the support, but there has also been support from various other entities and institutions, although at a much lower level. We go to the next slide. So this is a very interesting slide, because this shows you a little bit of what Jabulani said earlier about the issues that the emergent filmmakers face in respect of actually entering and moving on in the industry and growing in the industry. And that is that there has been a significant decrease in the number of successful applications for industry support. Now, mostly the reasons were given that people go for funding in areas where the funding is already used up and it's oversubscribed, and perhaps there's funding in other arenas, maybe for small films or other platforms and arenas and or genres, and that has not been accessed. So I guess it would also then be a good thing for the support agencies to come together to look at how do we change, how do we adjust then and to make sure that there is enough money, or is it a point of trying to force people into different genres, or is it a thing of moving the funding to different genres? So I think that needs much further discussion. Non-compliance, and this is now coming back to these incomplete applications, has been a big issue. And we talked here about the fact that we've had a lot, that there seems to be continuously the new players and not necessarily growth of existing players. It has been quite an expensive. It takes a long time for these applications to get through, and what happens is that some of the guidelines seem to change, and therefore the applications don't go through. So there's definitely support needed in business skills, particularly in the emerging film market, to help them actually apply for this industry support. Can we go to the next slide? I think I'm doing okay on time. Economic impact results. So this was the previous studies. No, this was our study results, sorry. I'll come to the previous study now. And you'll see that the direct spend has always been on a little bit of a roller coaster ride in any case since 2016, 2017. So the industry has not been growing. It's probably been sort of stagnating, going from 3.3 billion, then down to 2.6 billion, up again to 3 billion, but not quite reaching the 2016 17 levels. And then in 2019, before we even hit COVID, we already had a decline, a significant decline in the industry. So we were already feeling it. And then COVID came on top of that and really just totally took us out even more. So a significantly smaller direct spend in the industry, down to 1 billion from 3 billion. So basically 2/3 of the industry or direct spend gone in 4 years, 3-4 years, and basically in 1 year. It is a very significant change. If we can go to the next slide. So interestingly enough, we've had economic multipliers developed specifically through a company of economists, to say that quickly, Quantech, and they did it specifically for us for this study. To look at only the industry components that we are working with. And it's very interesting that it was quite similar to, if you look at the GDP multiplier, so how much money, if we put 1 rand in to the economy, how does it then translate and affect the economy and impact the economy in an indirect and induced format as well. So you pay a salary to somebody, they then go and buy food, and then those people that work for whoever's in the food company has to go and buy food and pay for things, etc. And that's how then this money keeps on generating itself and using itself through the economy. It's not changed significantly over the years, which perhaps is an indication that we have to do something different to make it stronger as a GDP multiplier, but at least it hasn't decreased either. The employment multiplier actually is slightly higher than what it was in the previous study. So that's actually quite a good thing as well. And also the industry multiplier is higher than the general South African multiplier, which shows that this industry does have the ability to create economic impact and create jobs at a far higher pace than what you generally find in the economy. So it is an important industry, therefore, from both of those aspects. The previous study that the CEO mentioned that was done had significantly higher direct spends than what our study came out with. So it was more at the 4 billion rand level than our 3 billion that was shown in the same year for 2016-2017. And the key difference with this from this is that both of the studies use the DTI's approved grants as a proxy when we look at impact and or notional expenditure. However, the 2017 study used the approved grants, whereas we only use the actual dispersed grants. So in our view, the approved grants, not all of that money would eventually be used. Sometimes it can be approved and not used. So therefore, we work with the money that was actually that we know went into the economy, and that could then create economic activity. So it's a slightly more conservative measure, but still obviously then showing a fairly significant number. Interestingly enough, the previous study also showed an industry that really did not change much. It was not so much of a up and down effect, but more of a sort of a stagnant same each year effect. Can I go to the next slide? Okay, then if we're looking at employment by skills level, so as I said before, when we lose these employees because of COVID, the worry is that we lose the skilled employees, because it's taken us time, obviously, to develop these skills and these employees. And if you look at that 53% is highly skilled jobs and 31% is skilled and semi-skilled jobs, then you can see that in this industry, skill is important. And therefore, we do not want to lose employees that we now have to train from scratch again. And it's going to take us some time to be able to then create that impact or increase that impact as we want to. So definitely, it's a good thing to have that level of skill in an industry. It's much higher than you see in many other industries that has far more unskilled and informal jobs. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so now there's ugly. So this is the if I had to say the good, the bad, and the ugly, maybe it's been more the bad, the worst, and the ugly. This is the ugly part. When we look at the extent of loss, as we said, the 59% detraction in the COVID year of 2020. It's on direct spend, it's a significant decrease. If we look at the total economic impact, then it is basically reduced down from 7.2 billion to 2.9 billion. So that is a significant amount of money lost because of COVID. And then if we look at employees, the number of employees, we can go to the next slide. If we look at employees, then we've essentially dropped from employing or sustaining 31,000 jobs in the industry down to only 13,000 jobs in the industry. It is really, really significant. And if you remember, I spoke about the international trends, so they obviously were able to come back faster and start filming again, and that support that was provided in commissioning new productions, etc., really made some of the jobs them able to keep their jobs at a much higher level or pace than we had. So globally, there was a 21% decrease or loss in jobs, and for us, it's a 58% loss in jobs. So it is really quite significant. So I think we will now have to be working as an industry to see how, and the support to the industry in how we bring this back as quickly as possible. And I know many of you are already doing that, and things have opened up. Can I go to the next slide? So we know that there's always the numbers, and the numbers are not very are quite hard to look at, but they still are very big reasons from an intangible benefit perspective of keeping this industry. It is an industry that can achieve employment equity and employment opportunities. It is an industry that has particularly the ability to develop entrepreneurs, as many of you are actually entrepreneurial businesses and self-earned businesses, and therefore it's not just creating jobs, but it's creating businesses. And I think that is an important impact. It definitely is an industry that can market South Africa, and it has a significant tourism impact. I can see where some of the industry has been kept afloat. So, for instance, I've been working with a hotel on a funding project in Cape Town, and in June, sort of April going to June, they actually had the Fear Factor, Indian Fear Factor, and then some Russian productions happening in South Africa, and basically keeping the hotel full at a time where we're ourselves not traveling. So it definitely is there and can still be there, and can continue. And obviously it brings a positive contribution to social cohesion. I mean, what would we have done during this time period without film and video and television productions to keep ourselves busy and to keep ourselves sane and connected? So definitely important. Next slide, please. So let's look at the recommendations. I think Jabulani mentioned this, the big challenge in respect of consistent communication, quality of the support that is being provided, and framework of key agencies ensuring that that they don't all support the same thing, but that there's enough support across the board. So therefore that communication interaction is quite important. So that is a big recommendation. So that improved coordination and making sure that it is effective support, not just that it is support, and that it goes right through the life cycle. Looking at changing the IP laws to allow filmmakers to own their IP from commissioned work, and therefore just be able to create more wealth in the hands of the filmmakers. This has definitely came up as a recommendation time and time again. Looking at how do we wean filmmakers off the subsidy, which in fact is there and is supporting a big, but there is also a lot of private financing going into it as well. But how do we wean it off to generate own revenues? And therefore, again, looking through the life cycle and not just at the front end of the life cycle. Introduce and then for people to disappear out of the life cycle after maybe 1 or 2 productions, but to keep going. To introduce incentives for production outside of major metropolitan areas. We've already seen a significant increase in the industries in KwaZulu-Natal and in the Eastern Cape, and obviously it would be great if that can develop even further. And then looking at a transferable tax credit that we can push more for international global funding so that they can transfer that tax credit also then to their own countries, and that will then hopefully increase investment from other sources and not just us trying to support ourselves. I hope that has answered a lot of questions. Maybe it's made you have a lot more questions, and hopefully we'll deal with that in the panel session. And back to you, Lala.
Christelle and Jabulani, thank you so much for that tangible data that paints the picture and the landscape of really where things are, really alarming results and data. But thank you for the recommendations. Certainly an opportunity for stakeholders as well as the industry to see what can be done, to see our industry bouncing back from that loss of jobs, over 51% of job losses globally. The report mentions 21%, and we see us locally here at over 50%. There's no doubt that the South African film has a vibrant film industry that has potential to contribute meaningfully to the country's GDP. And the industry really does have an ability to create entrepreneurs, as you mentioned, Christelle, has an ability to create jobs and businesses, and is brimming with potential to make an even more significant contribution. However, the salient findings show that COVID-19, the C word, as you call it, pandemic, had a destructive impact on the film industry. With the industry contribution to the South African economy contracting substantially by 59% in 2020 to 2021, compared to the 2019 and 2020, I mean, in total, the direct and indirect and induced economic impact of the film industry to the South African economy has been estimated to 7.2 billion in 2021-2020, declining to 2.9 billion in 2020 to 2021 is indeed a significant dive due to the negative impact of COVID-19. You know, as an industry representative myself, I can attest to these findings. COVID-19 has resulted in a number of job losses. There was certainly cancellation of work. Income and production activity had been exceptionally slow, and to resume, as most industry support measures really did focus on providing that short-term relief to the affected industry operators and employees. Thank you, Christelle. Thank you, Jabulani, for that. I'd like to now take the opportunity to open the floor to our panel members. As mentioned to you earlier, we had invited industry stakeholders who are key to the growth and to the flourishing of our industry, to give us their insight, to give us their takeout, to give us perhaps their recommendations on the study. I would like to call upon our first panel member. I'll give her 5 minutes. Her name is Mpho Maringa, who is a media specialist from the IDC. Mpho is, as mentioned, a media specialist from the IDC and audiovisual special business unit at the Industrial Development Corporation, where she gives industry insight for film financing. With a BA in Dramatic Arts from Wits University, she started her career in television as a researcher and scriptwriter. She was later appointed as an assistant commissioning editor at the SABC and moved to becoming a commissioning editor for the factual genre, where she reveled in developing meaningful content and nurturing of developing talent. Mpho, I would like to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lala. Never have I ever been introduced this formally in life. I felt like I should be doing something, a special pose that says, wow, the feeling of I have arrived. Thank you, Lala, and is it still morning? Good morning, everybody. As the IDC, we have actually been looking forward to this study with excitement and keen anticipation, because it really gives valuable insights into the real economic impact of this industry. And it also helps us understand the environment within which we provide funding. It helps us understand the scope of the landscape. And as a development finance institution, whose mandate it is to contribute to the development of a sustainable and growing industry, it was quite exciting to see some of the impact that the film industry does have. It is easy to look at the challenges first and not think that because we are doing, well, sometimes what we perceive as little, that it really does make a significant ripple within the greater economy of the country. The COVID impact on the industry is actually quite sobering. The industry was not at full development as it already was, and the research was showing a decline already. And for us to be hit by such a big thing, the impact is deeply felt and it's long lasting. And however, we still need to kind of work within that very same environment. It has shifted how we assess things. It has shifted how even the content is being consumed. It has shifted the possibility of revenue generation, something that is quite important to the IDC as an institution that gives us loan funding that is fully recoupable. It makes it even more challenging for producers or production companies to create a self-sustaining value chain. However, we do understand that the opportunities for growth and new opportunities to do things differently and in a different direction are still here. The biggest thing that we noted was the challenges around funding that come up. The discussions are not entirely new, but what is interesting or what is nice about this is the acknowledgement of saying we really need to focus on making commercially viable content. We really need to focus on creating sustainable businesses. And there has been an identification of the lack of business training and financial management. That sounds like you can't manage your budget, but I mean, running a film company as a sustainable business, and that mental shift is important to understand that our creative output is a means for creating income, is a means for creating jobs. And the multiplier, I do not for the life of me understand how multipliers work, but the takeout that I took was that this industry has the potential to create jobs, and that for the IDC is important. We have a scary youth unemployment rate. We have lost so much because of the breaks that COVID has brought. So it is important for us to create opportunities for creating that work. And I mean, the risk has changed with the numbers that we can have on sets, with the COVID protocols that we need to adhere to. Even the financial needs have changed, and how the IDC would lend out money in that environment has also changed. It is not impossible, it's just different challenges, and we look forward to having interventions such as this study to help us then reassess and reevaluate and look at how possibly to shift how we operate to support the industry. It is also of great concern that there's very limited private funding in this industry, and the opportunities are there, even if it's something like, if it's branding, it's there. It's just, there's this missing link between the connections and faith in the private sector, in the film industry. And I guess they need to understand that it is a formal business. What they make is investment decisions where they want to see their return on investment. So the film industry may be starting out in creating a strong South African filmic or editorial voice, but the investor needs to see the value for their money. And we then need to start finding a way to incorporate other funders and bring them in to this process. I guess that the three key takeouts that I have noted, this is me not knowing how to keep to 5 minutes, so I think I'm wrapping up, is that there is a lack of training or education for making film more commercially sustainable. And I guess it is a gap that we as the IDC can begin looking at and begin thinking around how we can address that gap. We note the importance of streamlining collaboration between the different entities that do fund in the sector. We do encounter those challenges while engaging and while trying to fund projects, and it really is high time that we use the opportunities where we interact with other sectors to kind of streamline and collaborate the engagement, because I feel like it's not only pain points for the industry, it creates pain points for us as well as, I don't know, officials and funders. And the most important takeout is the importance of research. I mean, this research already provides a basis of even looking at gaps in research that we as IDC can begin to see, so that we begin to find ways to better support the industry. So well done to the NFVF, and thank you for taking the initiative and actually stepping up to your role as being the custodian of the industry and availing this and making it, the English word just escaped me, a catalyst for further work on the development of the industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mpho from the IDC, for your input. Certainly, there is an opportunity to have a look at this tangible data and see what can be done to further enhance the industry. I note your three takeouts as lack of training, and that there's an opportunity to look at the gaps in terms of what can be done streamlining and collaboration within the different funding entities, and then the importance of research. Thank you so much. We will see you again when we've got questions. A reminder again to kindly post your questions for the organizations that are with us this afternoon. I'd like to call upon our next stakeholder, that is going to be Nirvana Singh. Nirvana is from the SABC. She's Acting Manager of Industry Development at the South African Broadcast Corporation. She's a genre manager of drama, video entertainment, and Nirvana was recently appointed as the genre manager for drama. Her role is to commission, is to curate, produce, and deliver all drama content for all SABC platforms. Her portfolio has over 120 titles, including 4 soapies, multiple telenovelas, dramas, comedies, sitcoms, and dramedies. Her previous role as head of industry development, Nirvana Singh partnered and co-funded projects. Formerly, she was the senior commissioning editor, drama at the SABC Content Hub, commissioning editor for Mzansi Magic and Mnet, as well as training and development at KwaZulu-Natal Film Commission. Her knowledge and experience brings a wealth of know-how to enrich her role in the industry development manage. Thank you, Nirvana. I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Lala. Next time I have to make that shorter. But thank you to the NFVF, and thank you to all my colleagues here today for inviting the SABC to participate and share in the knowledge building for our industry. I think for me, as industry development manager and on behalf of video entertainment, which is what we are now called at the SABC. You know, this kind of engagement with external stakeholders, this kind of information that we as the SABC have not been able to undertake research-wise for a long time. You know, it helps us, it guides us, it tells us what it is that we as the SABC needs to do more of, or how we need to engage with the industry as a whole. I think that I just needed to frame the SABC. It's a very important thing to understand where the SABC was almost 10 years ago, and then where the SABC is now. And it's a shame there's no other broadcasters here to also for you to understand. The SABC coming into COVID had just come out of a financial crisis since 2014. We had a whole new executive as well as a board. We also went through a retrenchment process, and we were restructured. And obviously we were bailed out, so we were ready to start engaging full force with the industry, and COVID happened to us, which really put a damper on the hard work that had been set out to engage with the industry, to spend more money in the industry, and also to commission more content. So when I look at the research and the figures that come out, it just, if you look at where the SABC is now and the kind of loss of revenue, loss of audience, decrease in the number of productions that we've had to either stop or postpone, the number of crew and cast that has decreased, because as the SABC, we do not have ability to produce content. So this has had a dire effect on us in that as a broadcaster, we have a clear output, and that is content for air, which obviously we haven't been able to fulfill. And that as a result, you will see more than the usual repeat of older completed programs. But also what you see is that as a result of decrease in production, and as the public broadcaster who is controlled by the mandate and through legislation, we are not able to fulfill our local content mandate. We are not able to fulfill our local language mandate. We're not able to fulfill our industry development skills programs, which is the transformation, which is bringing in new talent, which is bringing in youth and women and people of disability. All of that literally dissipated through COVID, and that's a huge problem for us, because we need to know now how we're going to bring this back, how we're going to meet these requirements that as the SABC we have. So it feels very despondent, and it feels, it's a very, we come to work every day. Well, technically we work from home every day, so we come to work in our home, and we've been, video entertainment has been working at home for the last almost year and 4 or 5 months. So we've been here a long time, and it does sound despondent, and it does sound like, there's no opportunity. But I think for us, we know COVID, yes, has brought a self-realization to us as an industry. It's given us that wake-up call. It's given us that wake-up call to tell us, as whether we are film and television practitioners, whether we are part of institutions, that there has to be change. Change needs to come. And relying on sources of funding that has been there, the classic funding, or the sources of broadcasters that have been there as the traditional, is that we need to move away from that. We need to develop ourselves. We need to engage ourselves. We need to spend more time trying to find opportunities that we create. So, and I think you see it, well, as the SABC, we have seen it, is that even with the challenges all our productions have faced, there's been new and innovative ways of going into production, working as teams, dealing with COVID on set, so supporting cast and crew. All of that, there's been ways and means we've dealt with it. And I think that when you do the next part of this research, we will see an impact of this in terms of the increase in support in the industry. But I think I don't want to take too long as well. I just wanted to highlight some of the areas that the SABC supported the industry with, even though we couldn't go on road shows, and do direct communication with the industry. But we continued during level 5. One of the big things we did was SABC did not stop cash flowing all its productions. So we even have new productions that have come in from April, May 2020. All of those productions were never stopped cash flowing. So that's a very important thing to note, that even though there was actually no work being done at that point because of lockdown levels, we supported the cast and crew of all our productions in the best way possible. The second thing, obviously, we continued contracting new productions, and since April last 2020, you would have noted that we've had more than 10 new programs on air across the 3 platforms. So that, again, the job creation and creating sustainability even in these hard times has been a thing that SABC has taken it very much to heart. We've also supported the productions through funding for COVID-related requirements on set. So, you know, the PPEs, and so we've included that in budgets and some of the projects. So that was also something very big for us. And we also did the repeat fees. We know that the repeat fees has always been an issue. We've been trying to, as the SABC, fast-track repeat fees that allows, you know, money into performers and writers and producers' hands, especially during this period. Of course, the one thing that has suffered is partnerships with us. You know, we have in the last 2 years increased our investment in partnerships through our pre-sale licenses. You know, we're sitting with almost 30 pre-sale licenses, and unfortunately, that's the one area that has been very badly impacted, because obviously there's no other funding available within the industry, and DTI has its the issues that it's facing, and therefore SABC, who's put up the first money, we are not seeing the completion of these projects, which is again something we need to think about. But yeah, let me not take any more time. I'll take questions. I will just a note, I cannot talk about the intellectual property issue, as this is part of a legislation that would have to be dealt with by the shareholder of the SABC. Thank you very much. Over to you, Lala.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nirvana, for that. Thank you for your input and for just giving us even a backstory in terms of where the SABC is and what work they continue to do during the lockdown and COVID. We do have some questions that keep coming in. We are noting them. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the time. We do have another 10 minutes for the panel conversation. We've got 3 more members of the panel for the panel discussion. I'd hereby like to request that we keep our feedback just a little bit short, so that we can really then start engaging with the questions that are coming in. But thank you so much. You have all been keeping to time. I hereby like to introduce to you the CEO of the KZN Film Commission, Ms. Carol. She became, Carol Kutsia rather, she became the CEO of the KZN Film Commission in October 2013, where she was required to set strategic foundation and establish the system, processes and policies in order for the business to begin operating as of the 1st of February 2014. Carol's role as CEO requires her to provide strategic guidance and to advise her executive team build solid partnerships and relationships with the industry and government organizations and coordinate all the efforts. She's got a beautiful profile and CV, but in the interest of time, Carol, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Lala, and thank you so much, the NFVF, for inviting us to participate. Thanks for the research. It's certainly very, very helpful in terms of ensuring that we understand the trends, the challenges, really hearing back from our very key stakeholders that we serve, because at the end of the day, as government agencies, we need to remain relevant at all times. It's also really exciting because it allows us to really measure the impact that we are having as our various initiatives, and to measure the return on investment of government's investment into this particular sector. And whilst we recognise the devastating impact that COVID has had on the sector, we like to look at the positives that have come out of it in terms of where we see this sector having greater resilience than other sectors, and that I think our bounce back is going to be much quicker than some of the other sectors. There are huge increases in opportunities because of the demand from the consumer side now for new content, and as we said, new distribution opportunities that really do drive the demand for particular African content. We also know that this has also brought home the awareness and the attention to the sector. We've proven over and over again, and these numbers show as well, that the economics is there, and that the investment from government's side would certainly have a huge bearing on the priorities, particularly around job creation, poverty alleviation. So hopefully we'll also fast track the policy developments that have been on the cards for a long time, because this has really exposed the freelancers in the industry and how exposed they are and unprotected. So we're hoping that that's going to push policy change much quicker. Interesting observation in terms of the financial contributors to this. Would be interested to hear just on the DTR side, seems a bit low, and we know that their budgets are substantially higher than ours, for example, and yet we've shown as contributing similar amounts. That was quite interesting for us to note that. I think for us, what's really key to driving the economic recovery in the sector is to get productions going. How do we unbundle these challenges? We know that there are funding implications from the COVID protocols, and we certainly put mechanisms in place to assist our productions to get going again. But I do agree that we as government agencies need to simplify processes. I think that we need to start looking at different processes for different tiers, because the Made for TV is a great opportunity for emerging filmmakers to really master the art. And as you've seen, it's really melded well in terms of job creation and impacting on that. Another area around the business skills is definitely an area we have found has impact on our ability to release payments, because filmmakers just aren't providing the necessary documentation, and it's frustrating for everyone, the filmmakers and for us as the commissions. I think also we need to really, as the different funding agencies come together, to see how we can make it easier for people to access funding. We have to improve our coordination in this regard. Also around policy alignment and the criteria, that also needs to really be clear, and we need to be on the same page as the different government organisations. Key to this whole sector is the rollout of IT infrastructure, particularly for the rural communities in terms of connectivity, because that really is the way that people are going to be consuming content in the future. Last comment is this: we were really excited as KZN to see that we're definitely making an impact as the Film Commission, where we've moved from 9% of the pie to now have 12% of the pie. So we're really excited about that. It supports the regional research we did, where we've seen 42% growth in terms of GDP numbers in KZN over the last 5 years. So we're very excited to see that we're doing something right, and it's the numbers, as much as the COVID numbers have obviously put a damper on this last year's figures. I still see that this sector has got huge potential, and we certainly are there 100% to support the industry. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Carol, for that succinct delivery of the feedback and in terms of how you have seen it. Indeed, congratulations to the KZN Film Commission in terms of those numbers going up. A reoccurring theme is seeing how funders can really come together in making sure that it becomes easier for funding opportunities for the industry. Also noting that perhaps there is an opportunity to look at application processes for the different tiers. I'd like to call upon Ms. Monica Rovic, who is Head of Film and Media Promotion Unit at Wesgrow. Before I do that, I do see the questions coming in. If you would like your question answered by a particular organization, please kindly do add that for us as well. Monica, over the 7 years, has led the Film and Media Promotion Unit at Wesgrow, which is in Cape Town, the Western Cape Region Tourism, Trade and Investment Promotion Agency. She previously worked as Durban International Film Festival Assistant Manager and headed its industry programs. She also does film program curation, serves on international jury, selection of panels, market experts, and programs. She is a certified African Film Commissioner and is passionate about the growing employment and investment in the 4IR creative industries. Monica, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, Lala, and the NFVF for inviting Wesgrow on the panel. Greeting to the other panelists and esteemed audience. It is such a privilege to live and work in such a beautiful place to tell stories, one being the Netflix My Octopus Teacher, one of the many award-winning films from our country. Amazing that during COVID pandemic, the BAFTA and Oscar were won by this collaborative Sea Change Project team. May I suggest that if we work together and use this research, we can help our industry continue to take advantage of all this beauty, the cultural diversity, and the economic instruments of this country to tell more stories and grow the economy. Thank you for this research, BDO. as we need government to know how important the 4IR industry is to the economy. The numbers are astounding and well laid out. Even as the definition of film is a bit narrow due to the ambit of the NFVF requirements, our promotion agency, for instance, promotes a bit more wider and deeper across all the screen industries, such as commercials, in the short films, stills, gaming, edutainment, VIR, and SFX, etc., which are also part of this creative ecosystem of freelancers and are not quite measured in this research. So when decision makers read this report, know that the opportunities for leveraging change are even more powerful than as stated. It is a huge industry. And for instance, when Wescro and the city of Cape Town did the research in 2017, there's some data in there to show a little bit more about what's happening. But I would suggest BDO and NFVF, this is very accurate change of what happened. There was stalling in 2018-19 due to the uncertainty. And we now have seen the COVID give us a double slam. So as the research shows, we need to recognize screen tech hires mostly youth. And it's quick to start up again if the ecosystem is managed and remains globally competitive. I would like to commend and highlight all the recommendations in the report, and to especially point out the option of a tax credit for foreign projects, so as to save the cash for the local projects as a future possibility. But before we add or change things, we need to fix the current issues. And thus, the current unreliability of the projects in the pipeline getting their incentives is generating global uncertainty as South Africa as a destination. And we've all heard that some of the bigger studios will now be waiting until this gets sorted. This information is embedded in the data of the larger report, and it was highlighted by our speakers. But may I please highlight it also as critical, because without that tentpole of foreign projects shooting here, the infrastructure built, such as mentioned in the report, the ships that were built for black sails, wouldn't have been possible. And thus, once made possible, that can be then lent to our industry at a much, much amortized rate, and create a pipeline of creative IP that feeds the local producers. Also like to highlight the recommendation to add a further incentive for industry if they shoot away from the major metropolitan areas. However, the risk to change the incentives now is that there wouldn't be much trust in them being paid. Let's clarify the other issues in the ecosystem of investment and that are being sorted out, such as getting vaccines to the industry by the very capable of rollout of vaccines to 18 and up, and to have the industry-specific sites. This was a huge win, and I celebrate that. On the other hand, we have the hiccup, though, of the lack of access to markets because we don't have a vaccine passport, but let's hope that changes soon. Also, the UK is keeping us on our red list for some reason. We need to get off of that. 25% of our short form commercial season comes from there. We're currently sitting at only 36,000 signatures and need 100,000 for the UK parliamentary discussion. Let's hope that gets sorted soon, and if we could all encourage people to sign that petition. We also have other very powerful relationships as the film industry and national government we need to celebrate. The Department of Home Affairs has worked with industry to form the Film Industry Visa Assistance Program, which really helps us stay competitive in the short film space by providing quick access to visas to attached to the producers in that program. So the sooner we can activate the research recommendations and rebuild an enabling environment, we can use this 4IR screen tech industry as a perfect opportunity to drive recovery in our economy. The industry is quick to start. It employs across the value chain of hospitality, logistics, it drives tourism. SA Tourism has recognized that in their strategy with Netflix launched at the African Tourism Summit just the other day. Also noting that the industry spends locally and the most of the production spent is on local employment, local infrastructure. So even the internationals that are being serviced here hire local, and that hiring is such a critical step in the recovery, and skills are transferred. We need to get people and facilities being employed and the hotels to be filled. Without the enabling statutory frameworks, especially incentive stability, major projects will not see South Africa as globally competitive, and they will leave or stay away. And many of our crew are also starting to leave to get the jobs that the industry couldn't land here. Let me close by saying that we are making steps to work collaboratively, and the sooner we do this, the better. This is an example here. City of Cape Town actually announced at the film engagement earlier this month that their new film-friendlier standard operating procedures and protocols, their steps towards a local film fund. And in this golden age of content, we don't want South Africa to miss the increase in production. And I love the report that was researched, that was mentioned in the research, the global screen production recovery report by SPI. And we need to highlight that the positive screen production, performance of screen production in previous recessions may provide some indication of the resilience and potential to help drive economic recovery. Lala, thank you so much for this opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Monica, and thank you for giving us that a different view. Again, coming across is the working together, the importance of working together, the importance of looking at the 4IR, and perhaps highlighting that the research, the study is perhaps silent on other forms of content, which is, commercial gaming and so forth. You mentioned the youth, you mentioned getting vaccines, which obviously limits us access to markets. Thank you so much for the questions that keep coming. We are indeed receiving them. On to our last speaker, and for time, we are doing exceptionally well. Thank you to my panelists. I'd like to hereby introduce Thandi Davis, who is an independent producer. Thandi has spent over 25 years working across the media industry. She began her career in PR and moved to produce for live TV broadcast, worked in the print media industry and the United Nations to deliver major events. She is an award-winning marketer and ran her own marketing agency that included various multinational clients. She served as Africa Regional Director for Fox International Channels. She is a founding partner and executive producer at Storyscope. Thandi served as co-chair of the Independent Producers Organization and is on the board of the Durban Film Mart and Lion Nkakane Foundation. Over to you, Thandi.
Thanks so much, Lala. Thanks for the opportunity. As an industry, we are pleased that research of this nature has taken place, and the insights gleaned are important in creating an understanding of what challenges our sector face and further allows us to plan interventions across the sector. The report outlines the challenges restricting the growth in the sector, and whilst it talks to funding, we need to specify, argue the biggest challenges to growth in the sector at the moment are the impact of the DTIC rebate issues, the lack of pandemic insurance cover, the SABC low content spend, where they're spending 15% versus 43% of the Mnet channels, and the fact that the rates paid to producers have not kept in line with inflation, meaning rates are now effectively 50% less than 12 years ago. The fact that we have no IP rights for producers on broadcast productions, which means that in the longer term, our income from work and our ability to reinvest and build our companies does not take place. Equally, that grant funding is generally project-based versus slate-based, which reduces our ability to build sustainable businesses. We note and agree with the discussion around distribution and marketing. Yes, there's a massive lack of understanding by producers of D&M. These issues should be factored into planning at the outset. We need to understand, have I a story? Who would want to listen to see it? Would they be prepared or able to pay for it? How would we consume it? And how do I get it onto that platform? Only when these are answered should the production commence and receive appropriate funding. But DMM must be included in the funding mix. In relation to transformation, we note that the report states that a large share of emerging Black filmmaker budgets are going to white companies, and the report should please clarify if this refers to suppliers, in which case most government funding stipulates a percentage of BE suppliers to qualify for funding, but it also needs to take into account the realities of market supply. Or does it refer to foreign servicing companies? Again, we view this as a misconception around the DTIC rebate structure and different schemes. We need to jointly work on where and how government funding is going to assist in both the development requirements of the sector and the commercial viability of the content produced. We need to ensure that as we grow the sector, we are developing and delivering films that are locally and internationally successful to attract more interest and investment and create more opportunities. The impact of COVID on our sector has been devastating, but the direct impact of COVID itself has been exacerbated by the DTIC problems and lack of pandemic cover, which has created the biggest knocks to the industry since lockdown. And the report highlights how government expenditure on the sector plummeted, despite us being able to resume work at level 4. We are in broad agreement that the industry needs to explore new funding models so as not to be perennially reliant on government funding. But we wish to note that nowhere in the world outside of Hollywood does the industry exist without meaningful government support. Government funding is not an act of grace, but should be viewed as a strategic investment to unlock economic activity, create jobs, and attract FDI. The overall ROI is greater than funds granted by government, and we recognize that support for this industry is a strategic investment. The industry is highly grateful for the relief funding received and reported on, but we know that the best relief for the sector would be pandemic insurance, and we continue to call on government to assist in this regard. This insurance will ensure that we get the sector working again and less reliant on relief funding. We note the feedback regarding the fronting in the sector and wish to ensure that allegations of this nature are duly investigated and that if such fraud is found to be perpetrated, that appropriate legal action against said companies is undertaken, and that we refrain from painting the entire sector as undertaking fronting, as the report presently does. The report reviews the global impact of COVID on the sector. We want to note the current reality. Since countries have introduced pandemic cover and increased incentives to satisfy the massive hunger for content, in less than 1 year, the industry has exploded globally from 177 billion of direct output to 220 billion. The UK, which got back to production 75% to production 2 months after introducing pandemic cover, is now experiencing the biggest production boom in its history and has a massive shortage of equipment and skills to service demand. South Africa is losing key scarce skills to the UK and other flourishing territories. South Africa is losing out the opportunities presented by this global production boom. We wish to firmly support the suggestion to introduce transferable tax credits. We would also look to redesigning Section 12(0) of the Income Tax Act to render it a viable instrument to attract investment, introduce tax breaks on various key investments for investors, resolve the DTIC issues, create certainty and rebuilding trust in terms of this reliable interest, this instrument, make it once again a reliable one. From a marketing perspective, we need to call for the reintroduction of the DTIC Sector Support Assistance Scheme for international marketing, attending international events, being able to sell content, meet and pitch to internationals, etc. Industry should be included in South Africa's outbound trade delegations. We need to streamline and coordinate with industry input government expenditure for all its various entities attending local, but especially international festivals and markets, which delivers little, if any, value back to the sector. To ensure less government, but more industry people attend South African content and its production destinations properly and holistically marketed, and generally is far better bang for buck than we currently have. We also wish to note that future reports should specifically include questions around gender, LGBTQ+, and differently abled individuals, economic roles and impacts on the sector, with a specific focus on transformation issues for these groups. Overall, we are pleased with the report and thank the NFVF for undertaking this and delivering a much-needed report to the industry. As the IPO, as we work very hard to try and get our industry back in place, this information is, of course, going to be invaluable to us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Thandi, so much, from obviously the IPO and the producer's voice. Definitely, looking at grant funding versus slate funding, looking at new funding models, perhaps, and, articulating the loss of key skills in the industry, looking at what's quite important, that pandemic insurance and cover. Ladies and gentlemen, it's actually ladies on the panel. Thank you so much for your input. Thank you for your recommendations. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for the thoughts on the study. Thank you, Jabulani. Thank you, Christelle, for presenting to us that research. I am going to open it up to our audience, and I will then be posing questions for you. We do have our first question, and this question I'm going to direct to DBO, Christelle or Jabulani, if you can take this for me. This is from Diane Hay from Gravel Road Distribution Group. Were all exhibitors' representatives approached to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on cinema?
Thank you, Lala, and thank you, Diane, for that question. Diane was in one of the stakeholder workshops that we held for this event, and indeed all the stakeholders in the industry were invited to the stakeholder workshop that came after the one-on-one engagement, and also there was an industry-wide online surveys. So the consultation was extended and the invite was extended to all stakeholders. Of course, in some areas of the value chain, the response rate was much lower than in others. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jabulani. CEO of the NFVF, if I may pose this next question to you. This is from Michael Orend from Spear Films, IPO. I'm not sure where the industry said that we should be weaned off subsidy. Other countries that we compete with are subsidized, and other sectors like automotive are subsidized. This is an industry that requires subsidy to compete internationally.
No, absolutely. And I think perhaps it should be viewed in context, right? Subsidies are absolutely important because then you have to look at what they enable the industry to do, right? And so I don't think that the idea would be to ever take them away. However, I think it's equally important for us to build an industry that to a large extent is self-sustaining, you know, and I think talking about IP rights and all of those measures that directly put money into the pockets of the practitioners, that's the sort of industry we should be striving to build, so that even as a developmental agency like the NFVF, then you really have the mandate and the job of looking after new entrants into the market. So I think, you know, you need to find a system that works for all, that is equitable for entrance into the industry, middle tiers as, you know, well as the highest tier within the industry. Understanding, obviously, what each of those different tiers serve, because you stand as an industry a far better chance of your highest tier of having the ability to create employment in large numbers based on the experience and the productions that they will take on, right? But I think you also want to make sure that you're building a future-proof industry that will not fold should you be hit with another, God forbid, you know, pandemic or something even worse than that. But I don't think that the idea would be to take away subsidies altogether. We should look at them as an enabler to creating an even better industry, you know, that is self-sustaining.
Thank you so much for that, CEO. It is indeed critical. We do have a third question from Luke Rouse, and I wonder if we have anyone from the DTI that could perhaps answer this. Executive producer Luke Rouse from Johannesburg, a film and television production company, Rouse House Productions, as well as EXCO member of the IPO and co-chair of Broadcast Subcommittee. From the IPO's perspective, a lot of our members are facing an extinction level crisis currently, due mainly to the insecurity and unreliability of the DTIC's funding to the industry. What recommendations does this report suggest to solving this major issue, more than just encouraging more dialogue as suggested in the report? Does this report suggest, what does it suggest to solving this major issue? Christelle, I want, while we find if there is someone from the DTIC on the call, if you can have a look at this.
Okay, so I'm going to have take a bash at answering part of the question. I'd like Jay to also just come in on this. So essentially, the report obviously does talk significantly and at various stages and on various components of the research about the issues faced in respect of DTIC. We talk about it from the perspective of not being able to move ahead. I think the IDC can maybe talk to this as well, the representative, because it also affects their ability as the actual funder at the end of the day, or providing the finance that comes through the DTI applications. So they cannot continue and do what they need to do. So it is a coordination issued, and it is a, how do we rectify the criteria that maybe keeps on changing so that we get consistency, we get understanding, and then when people go there, they have the right information and they understand exactly what it is that they have to provide, so that that doesn't carry on forever, that you have been awarded but you can't actually get the money, because that seems to be quite a bit. So if we look at how much is actually spent, and I think the West is a KZN lady that commented on this, that the spending seems to be quite low. Well, their spending is much lower because of these reasons. So I think all of those issues are dealt with in the report. We have to get this right. We also need to look at different ways. If you're talking about extension, we need to look at different ways of the funding taking place. So at the moment, I spoke about working capital. Many of the entities have kept themselves going. They've been using their own funds. They've been using savings if they are individual operators, etc. And now they actually need working capital to get going before they can even do anything else. So it needs a slightly different type of funding to come into play. Maybe the IDC lady can chat to that. Jay, I don't know if you want to add before the IDC lady, but I really would like for her to maybe just talk about this, because I think our interaction with her during the stakeholder interviews did bring this up as well.
Yes, I mean, perhaps just to add one point, Christelle, I think one of the issues with the difficulty or lack of coordination among the support agencies is the broader overall national institutional arrangement, where you find the DTIC, which is managing an important funding mechanism for the industry, sitting outside of, you know, the at least the recognized industry bodies, being at a national level, the Department of Arts and Culture, and also from a film industry focus, the NFVF. So perhaps an option to consider, or proposal to consider, would be to have the incentive program being administered by an agency that is solely responsible for film. There are a number of examples globally of such agencies. I mean, in the developing world, there's the agency in Brazil, which not only fulfills similar roles as the NFVF, but also administers the incentive program for the industry as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are still figuring out how we can get Ms. Nelly, who is from the DTIC, who is on part of the audience, to answer some of these questions. In the interim, I will move on. There is a comment from the NFVF Council Chair, Ms. Tulwana Ncheke. The IP legislation is currently under review. It is an opportunity for the industry to implement some of the recommendations. Thank you for that, Ms. Ncheke. We've got also another statement, a comment from Noma Tlabiso Mashwele, it is too early to wean this country off a subsidy from the stats, and the pandemic has made it worse. I'd suggest that the point be withdrawn actually from the report. I'm just going through, please excuse me, going through the questions. I do have another question here that I'd like to pose to Christelle. This question is from Linda Ndebele, who is a SWIFT board member. I don't know if this is Linda Ndebele or Linda. Written here is Linda Ndebele, board member of SWIFT. It is concerning that there is still a lack of effective coordination between government departments and its institutions on all spheres of government, when there is existence of SAAFF and Audiovisual Reference Group. Has there been any detailed practical recommendations from the industry on how these institutions should address this lack of effective coordination?
Hi there. I'm going to ask Jabulani to say if in the stakeholder interviews and in the workshops more detail was given. Obviously, in a presentation such as this, we try and get to the head points, but it's a very detailed study. So I would suggest you read. There are some suggestions there, but I'm going to ask Jay to answer, and perhaps some of the institutions can also just talk about now that this has come out, what movement there is in respect of coordination, both in respect of government bodies and private sector bodies actually linking up and speaking to each other on a more coordinated fashion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Christelle. I think one of the recommendations that is included in the report is to have formalized institutional structures where, for example, the NFVF is not meeting with the KZN Film Commission or Westgro on an ad hoc basis, but there are set of forums or structures where these entities meet either on a monthly, bi-monthly or quarterly basis, and there are set programs or activities that are shared among these agencies. For example, one of the suggestions was that to have a single application process for public sector funding, at least that covers all the requirements of the different industry bodies at a national and also a provincial level, so that once you as a operator of the industry, once you apply once, you don't have to take your application from one agency to another. If there's one streamlined application process where your application is submitted once into the system and it gets to be evaluated by the entities that you want your application to be sent to, in terms of just ticking which agencies you'd like to tap in for funding. I think that would go in some way in addressing the lack of coordination and integration. The unfortunate thing is that these various agencies are functions, or at least are creations of various acts at the national level and also at provincial levels. The NFVF is an agency that's created through an act of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. Similarly, with other provincial commissions such as KZN Film Commission, Westgro and Gauteng Film Commission, they are created through acts that have been enacted within those provinces. So it's very difficult to have just one size fits all approach. Thank you.
Thank you, BDO. I'm actually going to open up that question to the panel members, if each of them can take a hand at answering. I'll start with Ms. Kanyile. Carol, if I may go to you.
Yeah, look, this is really a very critical issue that has been raised around coordination, and the whole objective of setting up the SALF forum was for this very purpose. In fact, there was a finance workstream that was created out of that, where you would bring in all the funding agencies and deal with all these challenges. But unfortunately, we haven't seen much outcome out of those engagements. We've actually asked for a meeting quite urgently, a SALF meeting, because I don't think we've met in more than a year. So that is something that we have put on the agenda to deal with this. Obviously we need to understand that as the gentleman has said, we're all regulated by different legislature, but I do believe that there are areas of synergy that we can work on.
Monica?
Yes, I think Jay did state the obvious, and the South African Audiovisual Forum is what we were trying to do in an intergovernmental way, and it was working slowly, and the work stream for those who give finance was developed. I'm not in that stream because we don't give finance, but it needs to get going again, or something similar, where people who can talk about what they can do to lean into a project based on their KPIs, and to, yes, get urgent answers for industry from the intergovernmental space. So I do hope that gets going again, and I thank all of us who are on that advisory.
Sorry to cut you, Monica. Very, very important point. Absolutely. We've got another question again from Ms. Ndebele, again, SWIFT board member. How do the findings of this research compare with that of SACO and PwC? Was there any comparison done? She also claims she might have missed this earlier. Christelle?
I'll answer that question. Thank you, Lala. The PwC film and media report was reviewed, but the studies are not similar to. It's not an economic impact. And with regards to SACO, that study only was done to focus only on a certain period in the last year under review. For example, the study was from March till, or rather April 2020 till June 2020. Our study covered the entire financial year, and also the SACO study looked at the creative, cultural and creative industry more broadly, whereas this study is much more narrow. And Christelle did touch on it earlier in the presentation in terms of just the scale of the COVID-19 impact on the cultural and creative industries in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We've got another question, Ms. Ndebele. Did I hear correct that broadcasters and private investors prefer to invest in productions if there has been commitment from government funding? This could be disingenuous and may also be one of the elements that derails transformation in the industry. Nirvana, may I take this to you? And again, I'll take to Jabulani or Christelle according to the study.
Yeah, I think for me that was a kind of disparity in the recommendations that you had in your research, because as the SABC, and I can't talk about anybody else, as the SABC, our pre-sale license funding opportunities, that's where we are able to partner out of our 100% commission content. We do not have a stipulation that states you have to have money from other sources before we, as the SABC, can give you money. What we do say is that we can get into a pre-sale license agreement with you. However, you need, once you've raised the funding, the full production funding, that will release release money to you. That's the very different to saying we're not going to do it. So that's how we manage our pre-sale licenses. Thank you.
Was there
just
anyone?
to come in?
Yes, please.
Just to come in, Nirvana is correct, and I think Lindy Ndebele has got it the other way around, because it's the government, often the DTIC, that needs either broadcasters from a pre-sales perspective or private funders to provide some equity funding for it to unlock the incentive grant funding from the DTI, not broadcasters and private sector requiring government funding before their funding can be unlocked.
Yeah, so maybe if I can also just come in here. I mean, I think it is an important thing with most government funding, and perhaps the RDC would like to comment on this as well, is that it is very important to know that there's skin in the game before they come in with it brings a guarantee, it brings a sense of comfort for any financiers, including when you're putting government money in, whether it's grant funding or any other kind of platform that you're using or mechanism that you're using. So equity and skin in the game is always an important component. Maybe, I can't remember the lady's name now from the IDC, if you can just talk around that, because I think that is a very important factor.
Sure. Since IDC funding is recoupable, it is important that we see the commercial viability and the interest of the market in the product. So for certain instances, we do want to see the broadcasters' interest, especially if it's something like a TV series. We also do not fund 100%. So the IDC cap for funding is 49%. In as much as we can begin talking around it before all funding is secured, ideally we need to have the other funding on board. And if you've started discussions, but it's not locked, we may proceed, but the condition of our funding is that the other funders are also on board. I don't know if that's sufficient.
Thank you, Mpho. Thank you, Mpho, for that. Thank you for the questions, and we'll try very hard to answer all of them. Please also remember that the questions will also be available on the NFVF website along with the answers, including the ones that have been posed to the DTIC. We will make sure that we can have those questions answered. We do have a question for Nirvana at the SABC. Question for SABC: when do you open the educational tours for schools? Our kids still go to school for educational purposes, and we need to make it meaningful. Nirvana?
Thank you. Well, SABC is a national key point, as you know. So what has happened is that there's only essential stuff allowed, which is the news, studios, and things. So video entertainment, which is the unit I belong to, we haven't been we are not allowed to go in unless it is very critical. So at this stage, there is no intention to bring back any types of tours or access to the SABC in the near future. But we will keep you posted as soon as that we go back to normal work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nirvana. As soon as we go back to normal work, I do have a question from Nicola. Is there any information on the extension/revision of Section 12 of the Tax Act? Unfortunately, we don't have anyone from SARS that is on the call. However, the NFVF will make sure that this is answered. Going to go to the next question. This one is from Trish Downing, IPO. NFVF as a development agency. Development does not only refer to new entrants, but to the overarching development of this industry so that it can grow and thrive and fully realize its economic and job creation potential for the country. To ensure a conducive policy, legislative, regulator, policy, etc. framework to enable the industry to flourish and be internationally competitive, to address major challenges, e.g. the DTIC, lack of pandemic cover, and advocate within government on such matters so that the industry as a whole can develop. Reading this, I think this is a statement. However, Ms. Kanyile, if you'd like to come in and perhaps elaborate, perhaps respond.
No, absolutely. And I think what also cannot be lost, and I agree absolutely with everything that Trish said, and I think what also cannot be lost is, as part of our mandate, we do have a duty of ensuring that the industry grows in an equitable way, and we have a duty, especially to previously disadvantaged individuals. So, you know, even as I say, we're a developmental agency, it does not mean that we're only taking care of new entrants into the market. Absolutely not. I think we understand our role quite well in our ability to promote the industry on a global basis, and to ensure that on international platforms we are competitive, and we are acting as an enabler as far as the wider industry is concerned. So it's not to position ourselves as only taking care of a particular section of the industry, and I hope that's understood.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Kanyile. I do have a question for Monica from Quinton Fredericks, co-chair of the IPO. How does Wesgrow envisage supporting Black-owned production houses and creatives in the Western Cape, and also drive the transformation of the sector in the absence of a film commission?
Thank you, Lala, and thank you, Quinton. What a great question. As we are not a fully funded film commission, we are trying to do as many of the aspects of a film commission in the promotion side. But together with the Cape Town Film Office and the film and events team there, we did commission the study, Cape Town and the Western Cape Film and Media Sector Study, which had a number of recommendations. The first was to get a better website and to make it more user-friendly. The city has had to look at that internally because it becomes part of their mandate and their delivery across policy, strategy, and so forth. But at their film engagement a couple of weeks ago, they did mention that finally there will be a fund. And that fund is something that we're very excited that we hope will drive transformation. And it did come from our sector study, which is still available. Internally at province, level, because our unit is funded at province from the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, we are looking at further mapping of these strategic needs of the industry, and we are trying to come up with an action plan with the sector specialist in DDAT, and we are doing engagement and focus groups towards something. And we don't know what it's going to be, but we have hope that we will help drive transformation and regionality. Luckily, the Garden Route International Film Festival will happen now, I think today, and the Cape Town International Animation Festival, where more of these focus group discussions will happen. And please let us hope that we can get some more funds into local producers. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Quinton, for that question. I do see you have a second question, and this one is to Mpho at the IDC. In light of these issues being raised as major challenges in various fora dealing with the creative industries, Quinton, is that a non-counterintuitive financial approach by the IDC? Mpho, is that question clear for you?
I'm gonna attempt it. I think I understand, and I'm willing to be corrected if I misunderstood. So in as much as we have those requirements, and I don't want to say they're not hard and fast, because they are. It would sound counterintuitive, but it is quite possible and feasible, and we've been funding projects on that basis. And to a certain extent, there is based on the I'm even feeling like I'm setting the IDC up here a little bit, but there's always not room to negotiate, not that, but there's always certain projects which are so strong in certain aspects that you can tell that this we will wait to be fixed, so it becomes a condition. So something like finalizing your DTIC application. So it is possible, it is feasible, it just becomes tricky, and there are ways that we can work around it.
Okay.
Oh, no, actually not work around, work through it, past it, because work around it seems like you're changing the rules. No, it is quite feasible, and it is done.
Thank you, Mpho. I've got a question from Dennis Root, and I'm sure we can take one more question, and then I'm going to open up to the panel to probably give their closing remarks, ending with the NFVF CEO. Dennis, this is for Christelle. Dennis is from the media workshop. Has any research been conducted in return on investment of projects funded by all the relevant agencies? Such research might assist in improving funding criteria, which will allow limited funds to effect a greater impact on the growth of the industry.
So yes, there has been research. Actually, we did some research for the DTI regarding projects and their return, and also how do we adjust the incentive a couple of years ago. Maybe Jabulani can also just talk a little bit about that outcome. But that is the research I know about. I'm not sure if there's any further research that talks to that, but certainly that study did talk to that. I know the Western Cape's also had some work done in respect of looking at return on investment from specific projects to be able to understand when they are providing support, etc., that is in place. So, Jay, if you would maybe just have a quick answer.
Yes, thank you, Christelle. Correct. As part of the incentive design review study that was commissioned by the DTIC in 2017, we did a cost-benefit analysis, which essentially looked at the net benefit that is generated from the productions that are funded through the film incentive in terms of what cost it costs the DTIC and the industry as a whole to provide, or at least to extend funding to the industry, and what the net benefits are. And I mean, just to quote, when we did the study in 2017, for every R1 in incentive that the DTI spent in the industry, 25 Rand multiplier was generated for the industry. And that's just quoting just one stat. We are not sure whether that research has been issued out in the public, so we are not at liberty to go into great detail. But such study was done and completed in 2017 for the TTI.
Thank you, Jabulani. I'm just trying to scroll through to see if there are any questions. I do have NFVF members assisting me with questions. I do think we have come to the end of the questions. I don't see another question. May I open up then to our panel members to give your closing remarks after those questions and just to close off this engagement. Carol, if I may start with you.
Thank you very much again, Lala, for this opportunity. I think it's very useful having these stakeholder engagements. I think they're absolutely crucial. I think my biggest takeaway, if at any time government needs to be efficient, this is the time. We are the enablers. We're the ones that are going to really lead the recovery of the sector. And so I think really...
Carol, I'm so sorry to worry you, to disturb you rather. Can you mute your mic for me? Thank you. Please continue, Carol.
No problem. I was just saying this is the time for government departments to really be efficient. We are the facilitator. We are funding the majority of the productions taking place. And if we're wanting to see job creation taking place, we need to pull our socks up and get our stories right. And I think the urgency of getting us all together and ensuring that that happens is probably the most important time is now. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and we really look forward to supporting the growth of the industry.
I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you, I mean, we saw in slide 8 the geographic concentration of the film activity, that KwaZulu-Natal had shown a noticeable growth, as we had mentioned, in the film industry, and its fastest growing film destination in the country. What do you think are the drivers of growth in the province, and do you have advice to share with perhaps other provinces that are still, struggling and coming up with the film production?
Yeah, I think, I think it was really a discussion we had at the SAR forum that when you're a funder, you've got the ability to put in the conditions of that funding. And we were very clear about the funding. that you had to spend 50% of the production budget in KZN on KZN companies using local black crew. And because of that requirement in productions coming to this region, because there aren't any other incentives in any other provinces, it was very attractive to them. What we needed to do at the same time is then ensure that there were those skills. So we've been running a number of skills development programs. Nirvana, in fact, used to drive those when she was with us at the Film Commission. Develop those skills so those people can be employed on those production, those opportunities. And at the same time, we were creating film companies that would support those productions. So again, that there would be KZN companies locally based. And we've seen some amazing growth, and a lot of talent that came from KZN has come back home because of the long form TV productions that are happening here. So it's all of that has really culminated into some great economic activity in the province, and we're really excited about the opportunities that are here.
Thank you, Carol, from the KZN Film Commission, and thank you so much for your time and interrogating the study rather, and for your input. Monica, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Lala, and I echo what Carol said and congratulate her as I congratulate the NFVF on this study. We have to work together, we have to work fast, we have to get something off the ground to just kickstart this industry, which is suffering. It is in a critical point. We have a lot of answers here. We have to pick some and start moving the needle. And I really just want to celebrate also the latest recovery via with Netflix and SASFED and others to get that last bit of relief to those people and companies who are struggling. And it includes above the line, and it's still open. I think we don't realize when we talk about critical, we're talking about people whose whole companies and careers are in tatters, or they have to leave the country to keep working. And we need to solve this, because this is a beautiful, diverse place to tell inclusive stories, to train people from youth to high-level executives. We've seen it happen over and over again. The Film SA program now has the Academy of Creative Excellence. It's just a powerful, powerful tool to get people to head of department expertise and experience. And we need to celebrate these wins together. And yes, start talking about the whole value chain. I'm so excited that NFVF is working with TikTok. It's quite addictive, and it's a wonderful way to tell a story and to start developing those tools and give people the actual confidence to tell stories in public and start making industry headway for themselves as small businesses. And this is small businesses. It is mentioned earlier. It's a very entrepreneurial world. It's what the new 4IR ecosystem is all about. We have to make sure that people aren't left behind. And when the new tools come from AI, we have to be ready to pick those up and use them. And I think our creatives and our intellectuals here will solve those problems together. Let's get out of the way of industry. Let's work together and create that enabling environment. And the Build Back Better of this industry is what we want to do next. And now, it has to happen now. I just keep hearing the word now. We want it to happen. And I want to celebrate Film Cape Town for doing what they did and for announcing their fund, which hopefully the details will come through soon. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Program Director Lala and all my panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica, and thank you for your feedback and for your contribution. And I think the important thing that you are raising is about how fast this can happen and how strong this collaboration can take place, because it is quite critical for the industry, as the study has shown. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Nirvana from SABC.
Okay, a quick one. Thank you so much once again to invite the SABC to this panel. I agree and concur with my colleagues. I think the main issue right now is that as government agencies, we need to work together. We need to work together beyond us sitting around a table and having theoretical conversations. We have to work together, and as a public broadcaster, we are doing that. So partnering as we are with the NFVF, with KZN Film Commission, we haven't gotten Wesco yet, but we've been doing MOUs and having tangible, actual work getting done, ensuring that there's job creation. So for us, this although the impact study doesn't talk directly to television, it still has an impact on us and an understanding of the audiovisual environment. So for us, that's very critical to be part of, and we thank you for sharing that with us at the SABC, but we need to now make things happen. We need to move and do our best. So thank you very much once again.
Absolutely, Nirvana, and you know, from the industry engagements and the participants mentioned, you know, one of the challenges you mentioned earlier around SABC really participating in the licensing of content. One of the challenges restricting the growth of the film industry is that the broadcasters limit local filmmakers' ability to financially, you know, sustainably because of their exclusive rights and license requirements, which often deprives the filmmakers or producers the opportunity to earn perpetual income from their intellectual property. What is your view?
The reason we set up the acquisition model with the pre-sale license acquisition model is exactly to do that. As the SABC, we do not take intellectual property rights on those programs. So we come in as merely as a license holder, but we're coming early as in the pre-sale, because we believe that we cannot do it on all our programs, because obviously we have mandate and we have to keep our mandate requirements. However, this is a portal where this acquisition model gives producers the opportunity to own their property, to hold their IP, and then to also be able to sell, to license it to multiple platforms, whether it's terrestrial, pay, or streaming, simultaneously. You know, that's one of the unique elements of our model. We don't hold you back. We don't take your IP, and we don't hold you back that where you can't sell to Netflix before we go on air, or something like that. So yeah, so for us, it's a very strong model to enable the industry, not for us to just license content for the platforms.
Thank you so much, Nirvana. Thandi, I'm going to go to you as an independent producer and member of the IPO. How would you like to close for us today?
Absolutely. I think firstly we want to reiterate that government funding is imperative for the sector. You know, it can't disappear. It's the only way we can grow the sector. And as we stated, outside of Hollywood, there's no other country in the world where there isn't some kind of incentive and assistance for the sector globally. We also want to call on government to assist with putting in place the pandemic cover. This is really and truly key to us. We want to get the industry back working and less reliant on grants, which means we have to have pandemic cover in place. The IPO has been working very hard to work with the insurance industry to set up some kind of pandemic insurance for us, and we're really calling on government to come to the party to make this happen so our productions can get up and running as best as they can and as soon as possible. We also just want to talk about the impacts of the DTIC. This has been devastating for us in the sector. We have films that are sitting with hundreds of millions of rands of monies on productions that are now outstanding from the DTIC. This is really going to be the death knell for us if these productions are not, if our monies don't come after we've actually been approved by the DTIC and then find that income isn't coming back to us. So we really call on all these government agencies to work with us very closely in trying to ensure the DTIC rebate is working and is being what it needs to be for the sector. Lastly, we really want, you know, for all of us to understand that we want to be facilitated and not stifled. From a private sector perspective. This is really key for us. We're literally seeing a massive global explosion in terms of content production, and in South Africa, this is not happening. So we need to put the mechanisms in place to allow us, from the private sector perspective, to take up this cudgel, create more jobs, and get our content and our stories out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those are completely salient points. I do have a question for you, Thandi, from a producing point of view. Most local filmmakers often go into production without off-take agreements or distribution and marketing strategies. What do you think is the biggest challenge in this area as a producer?
Look, I think we need to train. I come from a broadcasting background, so I fundamentally understand what audience is. I know who I'm making a product for. I know who I'm buying a product for. And I think one of the key problems we have in the sector is that we haven't trained our producers to have that conversation at the outset when they are creating a story, who they're going to tell that story to. Am I going for a teen market? Is that teen market African or just local? And I think that when we get producers to answer those questions at the very beginning of their process, it becomes easier then to understand where you want to distribute, what your marketing requirements are going to be, and that's going to be key. I think the second thing is we haven't trained producers to understand that marketing starts from the minute you are developing that film. It does not start at the end of the process when you have gone into post-production. You literally have to have budgets in there to market whilst you're on set the whole way through. And these are just practical business lessons that need to be taught into producers in the country. As I said, I come from a broadcasting background, so I've really learned all of this stuff because I've sat on that side of the table, and these skills need to be pulled into this side of the industry firmly.
I appreciate that input, Thandi, so much. I'm going to move on to Mpho from the IDC. Your closing comments, Mpho. Okay, not a problem, Mpho. Thank you very much. Are you struggling to unmute there? That takes us, ladies and gentlemen, to all our audiences, to our NFVF CEO, Ms. Makhosazana Khanyile, to give us her closing remarks and perhaps, close it up for us. Ms. Khanyile.
Thanks, Lala. And I think I want to touch on two things. The urgency with which the industry needs to work together, I think that cannot be understated. And to that point, I want to point out the fact that we have, as at this morning, a letter sitting on the desk of our chairperson of council, which was co-penned by ourselves, the NFVF, as well as the IDC, imploring the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture to intervene as far as the DTIC is concerned. We understand the impact that it has on the industry and the urgency with which it needs to be resolved. And so, we've been trying in the background to secure a meeting with the Minister to outline all of the issues that industry keeps raising with us, including the insurance challenges. So, as far as our influence can take us, we're absolutely in the background working to make it happen. But I think what's even more important is, at least the key takeaway for me out of the study, and I love the robust engagement that it elicited this morning, it's just the understanding that for the industry to grow beyond where it is right now, for the industry to rebound, there's a reframing of the agenda of the industry at a ministerial level, at a government level. So government needs to reframe their strategic intent as far as supporting the industry is concerned, so that you're treating it a bit more or far more as just a cultural activity that is of national importance, right? So once you reframe it at that level, treating it as the business of making film, also starts to reframe how our practitioners, especially I think new entrants into the market, will start to treat it as well. And I think that for me is the perhaps biggest takeaway from this research exercise in terms of how we need to reframe it, the business skills that are needed. And I think Thandi also touched on that as well. But from a level of being able to work together as the different government agencies, there has to be a reframing at the top. There has to be an appreciation of what the industry is able to do as an economic driver and not treated as a nice to have, so that even the investment in the form of subsidies is understood as far bigger than just lending a hand in the industry, because that's not what it is. It's about enabling the industry. It's about helping the industry to grow. And so, you know, I think from the perspective of the NFVF, we understand the work that needs to happen at a much higher level than us, and are engaging with our council accordingly, so that they do bring up those discussions with the minister, so that there is a different appreciation that will enable the industry to grow. And so I think, thank you very much to our panelists. I loved the fresh take that absolutely everyone brought to the discussion, and thank you to all the participants that joined with their questions, and thank you to our program director this morning and now afternoon, and thanks everyone for joining us. And I think, you know, hopefully this is just the start of a much needed discussion that needs to be kept going. And, you know, certainly I'm not going to stop here, and I think that was the original intention for us to have this session, to say, you know, what are the pain points that we are picking out of this study? What are the burning challenges that we are picking up? What are we, you know, perhaps violently opposed to? I know the issue of subsidies elicited, you know, I suppose, strong debate, but those are the debates we should be having, because out of that comes the what next, you know, how then do we change it? How then do we move it forward? How then do we improve it? So thank you very much for your participation this, well, let me say today, it's no longer morning. And thank you very much, Lala.
National Film and Video Foundation CEO with her closing remarks, Ms. Makhosazana Kanyile, thanking all of us. Thank you to everyone. As mentioned earlier, I was your pilot for today. I was given from 11 to 1:30. I have landed everyone safely. It is 1:30 on the dot. Thank you for the contributions. Thank you, BDO, for the research that was presented to us. Thank you. Again, the research study will be available on the NFVF website. All the questions will be posted along with the answers. I thank you very much, and happy Heritage Weekend, everybody. Stay safe.